There's been very little about Chris Eubank Jr. since the win he had over Liam Smith back in September. I think roughly really the only kind of stuff that's been out about Eubank Jr. is the rumours that he was potentially going to fight Terence Crawford, which obviously I was kind of like, well, they're both trained by Bomac. I can't really see it happening. It just, Eubank is not a name in the States, so for me it was kind of like, don't really think that that's going to go anywhere. And then other than that, there's been literally nothing else. Other than people saying that he is a free agent or he's about to become a free agent, well, I think now Wasserman have pretty much confirmed that. So on their X page today, they said the following: "It's been an emotional ride. Wishing you all the best for the future, Chris and Nova Sport." They've not flat out said, you've parted companies or, you're gone or anything like that, but that they're basically alluding to it. It's implied with what they're saying there that Chris Eubank Jr. is no longer working with Wasserman Boxing, that he is now a free agent. He can fight, well, wherever. How the Wasserman Boxing deal was working is obviously they were the guys doing the promoting, and obviously Wasserman Boxing is the Sauerland brothers, Kellen Nassau Sauerland, I think is how you say his name. They were promoting Eubank Jr., they were doing all the work, but he was also fighting on Sky Sports in association with Boxers, so they were showing his shows. Two of the fights he had were pay-per-view, the two Liam Smith fights. He obviously headlined in Cardiff against Liam Williams, started 2022. So he's had some good nights on Sky, but again, he's not really done a great deal. He's not pushed forward that much anyway, certainly not the world honours or anything like that. He obviously lost the first Liam Smith fight and had to go and avenge that loss. The main thing they were trying to do, or the main fight they were looking at, was obviously Conor Benn. That fight was meant to happen October 22. It was actually going to be on the Zone, not even Sky. It didn't happen, we all know. And now since then, with the Liam Smith fights beside, there's been nothing really about Eubank Jr. I mean, and Eubank Jr. Eubank Jr. always had athleticism. You always knew skill-wise he was never the best, but he always had good athleticism, and you always thought, okay, he's got time on his side. He was in his mid-20s, when he was fighting the likes, I think he was in his mid to late 20s when he was fighting the likes of George Groves and losing. But you kind of thought, okay, he's got a bit of time on his side. If he can, fix a few things and, get a trainer who he obviously respects, and he seems to have that now in Bomac, he can do something. Problem is, now he's in his mid-30s. He's got to be about 34. I'm just guessing. I'd say he's about 34 years old. So he's not getting any younger. There's nothing happened over the last 6 months in terms of any fights that are lined up or any fights that are even being speculated. So where is he going and what is he doing? The thing about Eubank Jr. is that in the UK, certainly he is, I wouldn't go as far as saying he's, a massive, blockbuster name, but he is one of the bigger names in British boxing. And I would say that with confidence. He is. People know who Eubank Jr. is. So promoters would like to obviously work with him. I would imagine Boxer would obviously like to keep Eubank Jr. on Sky. Obviously, he was with Wasserman, but was obviously fighting in association with Boxer on Sky. So they're familiar with him. They need someone, they need flipping anyone, to be able to get on pay-per-view or even try and have big fight nights. Eddie Hearn, I'm sure, would like... Eddie Hearn has worked with Eubank Jr. in the past, and I know the Eubanks burned a lot of bridges back in the day, really burned bridges with Frank Warren and did with Eddie Hearn. Hearn is one of those promoters who just look. I mean, Billy Joe Saunders, I don't know what Billy Joe Saunders is doing. There's a video in of itself. But Billy Joe Saunders, who was very loyal to Frank Warren, ended up going to Eddie Hearn, despite the fact his dad really saying some not too nice things. Deontay Wilder, I know it's only apparently a one-fight deal, but nevertheless, he's still signed with Eddie Hearn. So Hearn has been willing to, mend bridges. If you've said something, whatever, we can work together. So I'm sure for Eubank Jr., he'd be like, well, yeah, happy days. We can have you on some shows in the UK. Whatever happens with Conor Benn, if he can fight in the UK, that's a fight that they'll definitely go down the road of trying to make again, 100%. But also you got to look at the Matchroom stable, and he could be thinking, hang on a minute, I could have you in some decent fights, even if it's, UK-based fights. If you move up to 168, there's a fight with potentially Callum Smith there. Oh, no, sorry, Callum Smith's at 175. But if you think of 168, there's a fight with Billy Joe Saunders, if he ever comes back. Because God knows, I might even do a video on Billy Joe Saunders, because for the last roughly 2 years we've been hearing, oh, he's gonna come back such and such time, and it's been nothing. And now it's just radio silence again from Billy Joe Saunders. God knows what he's doing. But at this point now in both guys' respective careers, I think the middleweight division is not the strongest division in boxing. Certainly isn't. The super middleweight division I would avoid if I was Chris Eubank or Billy Joe. I would avoid like the plague because that's a big division full of big names, big talent, and they're all way better. Simple as. But the middleweight division, it's kind of there is potential there. Could Eubank look to go down the world title road? I don't know. He could be too long in the tooth to really do anything. But if the Billy Joe Saunders fight is there, whether it be wouldn't be at 160, but it'd probably be at 168. If that's an option, if both guys work at Matchroom, if both guys go and have a respective fight, maybe they could fight in the same show and build to a big fight. There's a big UK fight right there for Eddie Hearn to put on. Maybe the Saudis would get involved and put it on one of the UK shows if they do more than the September date that they're talking about doing. There's a big fight there for Chris Eubank Jr. and Billy Joe Saunders respectively. And to be honest with you, at this point, I would make Chris Eubank Jr. the overwhelming favourite over Billy Joe Saunders. Because Billy Joe Saunders, he's been out of the ring now, as near as makes no difference, 3 years. Seeing the pictures, guy's always looking out of shape. He is going to come back, if he does come back, because he's never really hinted at retirement or anything like that, but he's always talked about coming back. But if he comes back, to say he's going to be a shell of himself will be an understatement, to say the least. He is going to look horrendous. Eubank could probably stop him, to be honest with you, because whether you like Eubank or you don't like him, he's not as talented a boxer as Billy Joe Saunders, certainly in his prime. But Eubank actually took his career a lot more serious, is a lot more dedicated, a lot more disciplined. And even if they both are the same age now, God only knows what age Billy Joe Saunders internally is. He might only be 33, 34 years old, but internally, God only knows. Whereas Eubank Jr., he lives the life. What can you say? There's a lot to be said for that. So Eubank Jr., a bit of a long one here, but Eubank Jr., now a free agent, who would he go with? Frank Warren, Eddie Hearn, Ben Shalom? If you were advising Chris Eubank Jr., who would you say would be the best to go with? And the reason why I say the UK-based promoters is because realistically, yeah, he's trained by an American coach, but is he really going to base himself in the States? He did work with Al Heyman when Al Heyman briefly tried to make inroads into the UK market with ITV. I think he ended up fighting on one of Charlo's undercards. I think he actually fought Korobov, if I'm not mistaken, towards the back end of 2019 on one of the Al Heyman US shows. Tried it, didn't really do anything. Yeah, he beat Korobov. I think that was it definitely was an injury. I think his shoulder or something popped out. But tried the US gig, didn't do anything, came back over to the UK. And yeah, I think he's going to be based himself. He's not going to go to the States other than to train. He's not going to fight over there, I don't think. So that's why I didn't mention any of the US promoters, because I just don't see, especially at this point in his career, you're not going to go and have 4 or 5 years to base yourself in the US and become a superstar, in the next couple of years. Eubank probably has about 2, maybe 3 years left at his absolute peak, if it's not even gone. So yeah, he's going to base himself 100% in the UK. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Hope you enjoyed it, people. Smash the like button if you could. Hit subscribe, of course, as always, if you haven't already. Peace.